Very often, when people ask me what I do, and I say I'm an archaeologist and I work on West African empires, I get very puzzled looks. Because for lots of people, there's still no such thing as African history. There's human origins and there's colonialism, but there's nothing in between. And in both media and political discourse, Africa, and in particular sub-Saharan Africa, is still presented very often as this eternal present of hunter-gatherers and huts, of famine, drought, and poverty, a place that essentially lived in the Stone Age till the Europeans showed up. And nothing could be further from reality, because Africa has had a very rich history of states and empires, of civilizations, of trade, of innovation and ideas, a history which is not just fascinating on its own, but also fundamental to understand that of the rest of the world. And that's why tonight, in the next few minutes, I'd like to give you some examples of those civilizations and the stories behind them. And being an archaeologist, I'm obviously going to start with archaeological sites. This one you might have heard about, I presume. This is one of the first things that in fact comes to mind when archaeology is mentioned. It's ancient Egypt. And it's also the one African civilization that tends to make it in our history books. Yet, while exciting and monumental, Egypt is by no means the end of the story. For example, 2,000 kilometers south of the previous picture, we encounter this, the Royal Pyramids of Mary in Sudan. And there's over 300 pyramids in Sudan, far more than there are in Egypt. These were built by the rulers of Kush, which was already a great civilization by the time the city of Rome was founded. It survived the Roman invasion and was still there by the collapse of the Roman Empire. So we keep going southeast, going to Aksum, the capital of the kingdom of the same name. And this became the largest power in the region after the collapse of Kush. Its monumental ruins feature things like the giant stela you can see here, including a 27-meter-high one, which is the largest structure of its sort in the whole world. The site also includes tombs and obelisks and castles. Also in Ethiopia, like Aksum was, are the 11 churches at Lalibela. And these are churches that were literally carved out of the living rock and communicated with each other through subterranean passages. These were built, or rather carved, in the 12th and 13th centuries by the local ruler as a way of creating a new Jerusalem, once Muslim expansions had hindered the traditional pilgrimages to actual Jerusalem. And all these churches are still places of pilgrimage today. Further south, in current Tanzania, we can visit the town of Kilwa Kisiwani, which was a central port in the Indian Ocean trade from the 9th century onwards, a central piece that connected the African interior with the coast, with Arabia, with India, with China and beyond. And Kilwa was visited in the 14th century by the Arabic traveler Ibn Battuta, who described it as one of the most beautiful cities in the world. And this was a man that had actually traveled the world. He'd been throughout Europe, Asia, and Africa, so a pretty well-informed opinion. Kilwa's mosque, which you can see here, was built out of coral stone and had domes and vaults decorated with Chinese porcelain. Also part of this trading network, but further south and inland, was Great Zimbabwe. And this was a site that impressed early European explorers so much with its sheer size and monumentality that they reported having found the capital of the Queen of Sheba and connected its construction to King Solomon. Although the biblical connection has not been dismissed, Great Zimbabwe is still an absolutely amazing site, the size of 100 football pitches, and the one archaeological site that can claim to have given name to a whole country, as the current country of Zimbabwe was named after it. Finally, on the opposite side of the continent, in current Mauritania, there's the town of Wadan, which was created in the 11th century to service trading caravans that crossed the Sahara. And like all the other sites I've mentioned so far, is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. This list is by no means complete. It's just to give you a flavor for the sort of things we find. You may have noticed, though, that all the sites I've presented have one thing in common. They were all built out of stone. And that's absolutely crucial, because not all areas had stone, and not all of them chose to build with it. For instance, we have buildings like this, the Great Mosque at Djenné in Karen, Mali. This is believed to be the largest mud-built building in the world. And mud is an absolutely fantastic building material, locally sourced, perfectly adapted to the local climate, and it looks great. However, it's not so good for preservation, because without constant maintenance, it very soon turns into rubble. For example, this is how a medium-sized fortress looked like in the 19th century in southern Mali. This is how the equivalent looks like now in southern Senegal, and these are fortresses of the same size, type, and period. What I mean to say by this is that the fact that in some cases we might not find great standing structures bearing testimony to the existence of these great empires and civilizations doesn't mean they didn't exist, especially when so little archaeology has been done to uncover them. And I'll give you a very specific example, the Empire of Mali. The Empire of Mali was, as you can see, one of the largest pre-colonial states in the history of Africa. It was also much bigger than some of the European counterparts, such as Charlemagne's Holy Roman Empire. It was founded in the 13th century by the warrior king Sunjata Keita, and it soon grew to become one of the most powerful, wealthy, and prosperous states in the whole continent. It is believed, in fact, that most of the gold that reached Europe up until the European arrival to the Americas was in fact traded by Mali's rulers. And I'd like to introduce you to one of those rulers. His name is Mansa Musa, and he's the man sitting there on the right with the golden nugget in his hand right in front of the Arab trader. And although Mansa Musa lived in the 14th century, he was recently in the news, having been deemed the richest person to have ever lived. And the reason why we know about this is because in 1324, Mansa Musa converted to Islam. Well, he converted a bit before, but in 1324, he decided to do the pilgrimage to Mecca, stopping on his way in Cairo. And he didn't exactly travel light. Wherever he stopped for the night, he built a mosque. There's a lot of nights between Mali and Mecca. In addition to this, he carried so much gold with him that he devalued the price of gold in Cairo for several decades after his visit. So it is thanks to visits like this and to the reports that Arabic traders and scholars like the one in the picture there wrote about them that we have a lot of information about Mali Empire. We know it had a very complex system of unwritten administration, of tax collection, and of diplomatic protocols. We also know it had a very substantial and well-equipped army and a complex state ideology. And yet, despite all this greatness and complexity, I have no great pictures to show you of Mali's towns and monuments like the ones I showed before. And yes, it's true, we still haven't found Mali's capital. We don't even know if it had one or several, and it's perfectly possible that if we find it, I'll be able to come back to you with jaw-dropping spectacular pictures of Mali's capital. But I seriously doubt it, because the truth is, unbaked mud architecture doesn't make for dramatic archaeology, regardless of the size and importance of the civilization that built it. So, it is true, reconstructing Africa's past poses some serious challenges. Most of its great civilizations didn't rely on writing, leaving us with without one of the most important sources of information. In many areas, the choice of unbaked mud brick as construction material makes for very poor preservation of architectural evidence. And due to a combination of these and reasons of political and historical nature, there's been a lot less archaeological research than in Mali, that's where I work, in Africa than for the rest of the world. And yet, despite these limitations, I hope to have shown you that this myth of Africa as a place without history, it's just that, a myth. And it's high time we dispelled it, because it's not just factually wrong, it's dangerous. Perpetuating this notion of Africa as a continent without a past has deeply damaging consequences for its future. Over the last few decades, historians and archaeologists have unveiled this landscape of towns and states, of empires and civilizations that have deeply changed and shaped world history. It is time now that the rest of the world knew about it as well. Thank you.